Hello, and welcome back to episode 7 of the Detours in Music podcast. I'm Laura Rupel, and today we're going to be talking with JMU theory professor, Dr. John Peterson. Hope you enjoy.
I'm John Peterson, and I teach music theory at James Madison University.
Awesome. Can you tell us about how you got your start in music?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and when I was a kid, I took like piano lessons, with a private teacher. My parents got me into that. My mom was always wanting us to do many different things so that we would, so we took like skiing lessons, and like I took springboard diving in one like crazy summer for some reason. But anyway, piano lessons was like part of that. And I enjoyed that. Piano wasn't necessarily my, inspiring thing. But it was really, I would say, in grade 7 when I realized that I had this passion for music. Okay. And it was, I'm sure like many people, a music teacher, who got me into music. Her name was Jeanette Wilson. And she... in grade 7, so she taught middle school music from grade 6 to 8, and in grade 7 was when everyone in Canada starts playing, instruments, which I think is much later than many people in the U.S. And so she had this day where she would like lay out all the mouthpieces for various instruments, and like then we could also like try drums and like guitar and stuff. And so like I'm going through all the stations, and it turned out that saxophone was the only one that I could make a noise on, like only mouthpiece I could make a noise on. And so I like wrote that down as my number one, instrument or whatever. And so I got placed on tenor saxophone. And I loved that, when I like
as
actually got to play
like,
it.
That
seemed like a good instrument for me. And so she was very encouraging. I got to play in band and stuff. And in my middle school, it was, I would say, the strongest music program in my community, which is Milton, Ontario, a little small town at that time. She was very enthusiastic, which I think made a lot of people want to do, music. So it was a very popular thing to do. Everybody wanted to be in the band, and you had to like state your interest, and then she would like put up the sign up. I don't really remember if there was an audition process. I'm guessing not, but
you did have to like show.
You had to show interest. Yeah, exactly. And so I did, band in grade 7, and then I continued in grade 8, and there were these regional bands that you could do as well, and those you did have to audition for, and your music teacher had to nominate you, to do that. And so I got to do like, there was a junior wind ensemble thing that I did, and a junior jazz ensemble thing that I did, and I think those experiences really, kick-started my love of music. And plus you get to know like a bunch of, different people that do it. And so like through high school, I went to a high school that had a weaker music program. And there was another high school in town that had a much stronger music program. And most of my friends went there that were the strong music people. But it was great because we had played in these ensembles that weren't part of the middle school. They were these auditioned, regional ensembles. And so then I got to still play with them later on because we knew each other, kind of a thing. And so in high school, I was still very invested in music. I started my own jazz combo in high school. And we would play around town. One time we played for... a fundraiser to raise funds for our prom, because at one point the school said they weren't going to support our prom anymore, so now we had to like raise money. And so we would play in like the grocery store. There was like this balcony in the grocery store, and we would play. And I remember we must have been very loud because like the people, that were
seem happy.
like they were like upset every time we came to play, but they had this contract with us. So we went like 8 times, I think, and every time it was like clearly not very good for them. But so then it came time to decide what to do for college, and I decided I wanted to do music, and I had been playing in both jazz band and concert band, I had no idea that this thing called the classical saxophone existed. Mostly what I knew was jazz, and so like I just assumed I was going to go for jazz. So there aren't a whole lot of programs that are strong in Canada for music. I think there are more now than there were when I was going through. But basically, it was like I could go to U of T, University of Toronto for jazz, or I could go to McGill for jazz, and those were like the two, big jazz schools. So I did that. I decided to audition. My parents bought me a brand new custom tenor saxophone, so that I could, have the best, quality instrument for my auditions. And I remember my parents were very supportive, but it's a lot of time, that they have to take to drive me to these auditions. And so they didn't take me to the one at Toronto or the one at McGill. The one in Toronto I drove myself, which was not that big a deal because it's like 45 minutes away. But McGill was like 6 or 8 hours away from where I, lived. And my guidance counselors in high school were very supportive. And when they heard that my parents weren't going to, take me, they said, "Oh, we'll drive you." So I went with my guidance counselors, which is like wild to me that they were so, supportive. That's like that. Though. Yeah. Anyway, so I did that. And I also, as like a backup option, I auditioned at University of Western Ontario and Wilfrid Laurier University for classical saxophone. And it was my first time ever playing classical saxophone. In fact, you have to audition on alto, and I didn't own an alto. I had just bought a tenor, so I had to like borrow an alto. And I didn't get in anywhere on jazz. I just got in on classical saxophone, which was sort of, it's like ridiculous that happened, but also my parents had just bought me this new tenor, and now I had to sell that and buy a new, alto, and that was kind of a mess.
Had you taken any lessons on saxophone?
I started taking lessons right before I auditioned.
Like, to get prepared for
those. Exactly. Okay. Like I think I had 2 months of, of lessons. And it's not, again, it's not very common for people to take private lessons on an instrument other than piano, in Canada. So I wasn't out of the norm really there. Okay, so so I guess it was fine. So I went to University of Western Ontario for my undergrad, and I was pretty disappointed, that I didn't get in for jazz because that's really what I wanted. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll do composition, because I didn't think that I was going to be like a classical saxophone performer, so I didn't know what that was. So I was a composition major for the first portion of my career. Then I realized composition was not going to be the thing for me. It was always a struggle to write. Like I really worked at it, and I was never proud of anything that I wrote. And at some point, I don't remember when, but I must have thought like, there's no way that I want to spend my life working this hard to not be proud of what I'm doing. So then I thought, I actually had started to enjoy performing classically on the saxophone, and I was in all these saxophone quartets, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do that. So I started going down the path of saxophone performance, and then in like the end of my third year, I think, beginning of my fourth year, I got tendonitis, and it got to the point where I couldn't even like pick up a water glass, or anything. It was really bad, and so performance wasn't going to pan out, very well for me. But because I had been doing the composition thing, I'd been taking all these theory classes that were part of the composition program. And Western had a very strong undergraduate theory program, so I'd taken a lot. And I had really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, I knew like at the end of my undergrad that I wasn't done, studying music. And so I thought I'd go into theory and just see what that was like. So theory is more prominent in the US than it is in Canada. So I applied to my home school, and then I applied to 6 other schools in the US. And I went for all these interviews. Again, like for example, I got an interview at Indiana, and like I had a friend drive me down to Indiana, where I would go for this interview, which was great. And I didn't get in anywhere. I got into my home school, and I got into the University of Colorado. And so that was, again, like super disappointing, to me. But I was lucky that I had 2 places to choose from, and I knew I didn't want to stay at my home school, so I left and went to the University of Colorado. And that turned out to be a great place for me to be, because the program, they don't have a PhD program there, so their master's students get all kinds of opportunities that they might not have gotten had there been a PhD program. And it was a relatively small program. I was the second graduate in music theory there. Wow. The first one graduated the year before I did, so it was a relatively new program, relatively small, but a lot of theory faculty there. So I got a lot of attention, and they had diverse interests, so I got to sort of experiment there. I got a lot of teaching experience there where I was the actual teacher, not just like grading something. Yeah. And all of that, combined to make me realize that, oh yeah, theory is something that I really could see myself, doing. So it was really my master's where I realized that this was something that, I could do. And so I actually stayed there an extra year because I felt like at the end of my second year, I wasn't quite ready, to leave and to go. And that turned out to be a good decision for me. I got to study one-on-one with some pretty famous theorists who were in the area but not teaching at the school. And then I applied again to 7 different places, all in the U.S., and this time I got in everywhere, which was so great. It was like, oh, I've like improved, like I've really, I've done it. The right path. Yeah, right, exactly. And so I had my pick of places, and Florida State was the place that I went because it felt like the right place. I mean, there was something special about the audition process there. Every single faculty member took time out of their day to meet with every audition person, which was not the case at every place that I went, and so that told me, that they were going to be very hands-on and really helpful, So that was a great place, and I managed to finish my degree early there, and then got my job at JMU, and it all kind of worked.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you played, or I guess, what was the experience like being like, I'm going to be a performance major, and then thinking like, oh, my hand is injured, but then like, I'm assuming your hands got better eventually.
They did, but there were a combination of things. I was scared to pick up the saxophone again because of what had happened, and I had seen some doctors about it, and it almost seems like this very mysterious thing. Like there's no one seems to know how to fix it, and there were people who looked at my posture and stuff while I was playing and said like, you don't look tense. I don't know, and so I think I had like a fear develop, of like, gosh, if I pick up the saxophone, what's going to happen, and of course, as I was doing my graduate work, I was doing a lot of writing on the computer, and I was really nervous also that it would come back and I wouldn't be able to type anymore, and then what was I going to do, kind of a thing. So, and then also I had to learn to play piano much better than I could, because for teaching and stuff, I needed piano, and just it's something that is I think, skill that's useful for every musician to have, to be able to just sort of sit down at the piano and plunk something out so that you can hear the harmony, happening and stuff. So I was practicing some piano as well, and all that, made me not want to, play again. So I haven't played saxophone in many years now. I don't know if I can remember. And in fact, I just sold my alto to an undergraduate student in Colorado who, he had like a student model saxophone and, needed a professional one. And I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity for you. Yeah. But I also, so a few weeks ago, I went to New York to see Wozzeck at the Met. And I've wanted to get back into playing more. I was never a very big fan of playing alto. I liked to play baritone saxophone. And I was walking down the street, just killing time before our bus to come back home. And I saw this like printed paper sign, handwritten, that said saxophone sales and repairs, on like a little door. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll go in. So I went in, and it's like a big, scary set of stairs. It was just like straight up 3 floors, and I thought this could either be really scary or this is going to be amazing.
Or it's normal.
And so I went in, and it turned out to be this really young guy, John Ledbetter, who did a degree at UNT in jazz saxophone, and then apprenticed, I think, with someone who does like woodwind repair, and then opened his own shop.
Yeah.
And now he does repairs for all these famous saxophonists in New York, and is actually quite well. I mean, I didn't know him because I'm not really in the saxophone circle, but as I did some research, it turns out he's quite well known. And he was there, and he also, it turns out, builds custom saxophones with his name on them, and he was just so enthusiastic and really nice, guy. And so I decided to buy a baritone from him. So he's making me a custom baritone that's going to come in a few months, and I'll get into playing that way, I think, again.
Cool.
But I've also, I've wanted to, branch out a little bit. And so I bought a mandolin a year and a half ago, and I've started to get into bluegrass playing a little bit, and that has been just a blast. It's a totally different style than I'm used to. But there is an intuitiveness about mandolin playing for me that I haven't experienced with piano or with saxophone.
Okay.
And so it seems it was easier for me to pick up than both of those instruments. And I've had this strange experience where, when I got out of playing seriously, my skills in music theory were just starting to develop.
Yeah.
And now coming back into it, like playing piano and stuff, I'm a pretty cerebral person, when it comes to learning music. But with mandolin, I don't need that necessarily. I can, but I don't have to have that. I can just play, sort of, intuitively, and not at first think critically, about what I'm doing. And then once I've got it, then I can, kind of.
And that can be, I guess, part of the tension. Maybe it wasn't visible, but very mental. Like if you're really like trying to make sure everything's perfect. And placement of everything, that could be part of it too.
Right. Yeah. There is, I think, a point at which you just need to say, okay, let me feel this out, first, and then, okay, now I can like layer on whatever else I'm going to do, with it. Yeah. So that's been a different experience for me too. And I'm kind of excited to see what happens when I get, my baritone, because that's definitely the place where I feel most comfortable playing, so I'm excited to see like how has my ability to interpret music changed, from when I was an undergrad and still kind of shaping my career and stuff, to now knowing so much more about style and different composers and just how music works. How will that like change my ability to play? I think I'm super excited to see.
Wait. You should record it. When you were in high school or even experiencing some of these questions, were you ever considering a career outside of music?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few ways I can answer that. One is I never thought that I would be a teacher. That was not, my plan. So that's kind of a funny thing that happened. I mean, when I first started down music theory, I thought really I was going to be a researcher. Like that was what I wanted to do. And then as I taught more and more, I realized, I like doing this. People seem to respond well, to my teaching. And so that's something that I'd like to add. Yeah. But I was very into science when I was in high school. I took all kinds of science classes except physics. I never seemed to really enjoy physics very much, but biology and chemistry I really liked. But I never liked the experiment part of it. Yeah. There's always like we're going to learn about some theoretical apparatus, and then we'll put it to use by doing some experiment. And for whatever reason, I remember we had to dissect a pig once, like a pig fetus. I'm sure everyone did that. And I just did not want to touch that. And I was lucky because I had a friend who was really into science, Kristen, and we always paired together. Yeah, exactly. Because she loved to do that. And I'd be like, I'll do the write-up. I'm super happy to do that. You do I'll read the directions to you and you do the thing. But so I thought for a while that maybe I should go into science. And still, I'm very interested in the science aspect. I've thought, I'd really like to get into more psychological studies of music, perception, and I'm really interested in human behavior and why we do things the way that we do them. And so, if I had to choose something right now, if it was okay, for whatever reason, I'm going to get out of music and go into something else, I've thought, psychology would be such an interesting, field to go into to understand why we do the things that we do. And it pairs so easily with music as well that it's a way, that I could do that. On the other hand, I've also thought, man, it'd be fun to just open a coffee shop.
Yes, oh my gosh.
And then you can have conversations with people all day, and like you can program music events or other arts events, and like it could be a very cool thing. And I don't know, that sounds like fun too.
Yes, it does. What are some things that you struggle with in your degrees, and then what are advice you would give to students struggling with those similar things?
One thing that I know that I've struggled with and that I see in students as well is relevance of things that you study sometimes. And I can think of a few times this has happened to me. One is in my undergraduate, everyone had to take a vocal techniques class in their first year. And so vocal techniques is basically like many of the music education techniques classes where, you learn what's the proper way to sing, what are the parts of the human body that contribute to singing, how should you sit, how should you stand. We had to learn repertoire and do solo and ensemble performances, with good diction, and like we had to work with a vocal coach and everything in that semester. And that was so scary for me because I'd never sung in my life, and I had much worse pitch perception than any of my other, friends. And so like getting up and singing solo in front of people, I was constantly singing the wrong pitches and like not, not right. And then like you're thinking about how do you shape the words, and like it's just you standing there in front of everyone, and that's scary too. At the time I was thinking, what am I doing with this? Like this, I'm not a singer. I'm never going to sing. Like I don't understand why I would have to do this. And the same thing happened with, when I was doing the oral skills program. I would say that was one of the weakest components of my undergraduate education. And I did not care about oral skills in the least. At Western, it was divided among 3 different classes. So we had an hour keyboard class, an hour sight singing class, and an hour dictation class every week. It wasn't like in most U.S. schools, the dictation and sight singing is like 3 times or 2 times a week. It was just like 1 hour each week. And they seemed unconnected to each other and completely irrelevant to anything I was studying, And it was, again, I was so frustrated and didn't care, and I wasn't good at it, and didn't care that I wasn't good at it, And then I had this moment in like the 3rd year of my program where I was in jazz ensemble and being asked to improvise and realizing that I had no idea how to hear anything around me, and how was I going to improvise when I didn't know what chords were happening or like how my notes should fit into those chords. And so I really had to work then post oral skills curriculum to actually develop my oral skills. So at that point I realized like, shoot, I should have put much more effort into this, because now suddenly it's become relevant and I can't do it, and it's so much harder now because I have to work by myself on it. The vocal techniques came in later in my teaching when suddenly I was teaching oral skills, which I had never envisioned I would do, and like I had to have warm-ups for people, and I had to like know like, okay, this person is telling me they're having trouble like matching pitch or whatever. What can I say to them both physically and just metaphorically to try to help them, do that kind of a thing. So that class turned out to be quite useful, but at the time it was like, I don't understand what this is going to do for me.
Do you think that struggling with oral skills and matching pitch actually makes you a better teacher?
I think so. Because I have I wish I had struggled in the class with the teacher, because then I think I would have gained more from it, but I had to do it on my own, and so in doing that, I kind of learned what would help me and, went down a whole bunch of different paths, and that gave me many tools to give other people, to help them be successful. So I think that did help. But I think if I had have been more, I feel like I was not the best student that I could have been. I wish I had have been more open. And I think that's one thing that I would say, to students is, if I could change something about the way that I was thinking, in my undergrad, it would have been to just be open to all the experiences that, I was getting at the time, because really you think where you're going to end up, and I just didn't, and maybe I would have gotten more, from all those experiences had I been a little more open to, things coming at me and just really tried, given my honest effort in every class, that I did. I think that's one big thing.
Parts of me wishes that, like, I understand why theory and oral skills and piano are at the beginning of college, but also I kind of wish that they were at the end.
Yeah.
Same with, like, history. It's like, because now I'm applying for grad schools and now I have to take exams.
Right.
It's like, whoa,
I've forgotten everything.
I put it all in the back of my mind, and it's always relevant. I think we all, we study for the test and try to pass the class.
Well, and part of that is the way that school and college is structured. I often think the semester time frame is so challenging for many students because we all learn at different paces, and some topics take longer than others, and sometimes you get a group of people that's really interested in one topic and you want to stretch it out, but that means you won't get to these other things, and wouldn't it be great if we could just say, well, we have a much longer block of time to be able to cover stuff. But, I can't think of a better way to, there needs to be some end, and there needs to be some way to block off time, and I can't think of a better way to do it than the systems we have, But I think that oftentimes leads to problems as well.
Another question I can think of, which I could be completely wrong, but I just don't know. Growing up in Canada, does moving to the United States or going to a school in the United States, does that seem super normal, or is that like a big detour?
Yeah. Well, I didn't plan to move, certainly. And there were a lot of steps to learning. Looking back, one thing that surprises me about it is I don't remember being scared to move, and it's like a big move. I was moving way far. Toronto is we're talking above New York, and I moved all the way to Colorado, so it's like a big move. In terms of finances, it's not like I had a lot of money or anything. And I was lucky because I had gotten a scholarship, so that really helped. But I had to, find an apartment on my own, and it was the first time ever that I was going to live on my own. I do remember, my mom very kindly drove me across the country, moved, my stuff, got me kind of set up in my apartment and everything. We went on a little vacation. But then when she left, it was like, that's it. For those first few weeks. And it was before school had started. So I was really on my own, for the first time. I knew no one. I was in a foreign country, and but for some reason I was not scared when I was, planning the move down there and everything. It was really, I think, after she left that I was like, oh, I have to live with this. I'm on my own. What have I done, here? Yes. So that was a learning curve for me. The other thing I think that I discovered is there are many things that are similar about Canada and the US, and the things that are different are really small things. I kept telling my family, things are so much more convenient in the US than they are in Canada. Grocery stores are open till, in many cases, 24 hours a day, but at least till very late. And anything that I want to buy, I seem to be able to get. Whereas in Canada, it's like, no, the grocery store closes at 6 or whatever. The bank closes. You can't just go. When you want. So that was a learning curve. There were other cultural things that were different, I think. For example, it seemed like everyone had been driving a car for quite a long time, and everyone seemed to have a car.
Yes.
And in Canada, it wasn't like that. It was no, you start, driving at 16, but very few people are going to own a car, when they're kids. And even in undergrad, very few people owned a car. It was you take the bus or you walk, or whatever. But suddenly everyone had a car, around me and could get around. So there were little things like that I think prompted me to learn more about myself and the world. And I guess that's maybe another piece of advice that I would give people is if you have the opportunity to travel outside of your regional area that you should definitely take that. Like going to Europe in recent times and stuff has taught me so much that you're not going to be able to get, from school. So I think travel is something that opens doors and really makes you understand where other people come from and how to contextualize what you've learned in the broader story, that's, I think, is being told. Yeah.
Awesome. I guess in your transition into being a professor, becoming a theorist was the big detour. Since being a theorist, has there been any changes that were unexpected to you?
I think one thing that comes to mind is, so you go through school, right? And my path was very focused on a job in higher ed, because when you go into music theory, it's not, there are other things you can do. I have friends, for example, that have gone on to work in the tech sector, like for Microsoft, doing artificial intelligence learning and using their PhD in music theory to apply to how can I get a machine to compose, or that sort of thing. So there are other things you can do, but the sort of easy, I'll say, in quotes, path, or the more direct path, is to go into academia, right? And so that's what I had been, training for in my doctorate. But there's only so much that you can cover. And you think you'd think being in school for this long, being steeped in universities and having gone to many different ones and, being on this training path, I would get it. I would understand what it's about. But then when you get into being a professor in your job, there's all these other things that you didn't realize were there, because probably rightfully your teachers try to shield you from some of that, and so then you're plunked in and you have to navigate political things sometimes, or just how do I even dress? I remember the first year that I was here, I was just wearing what I normally wore in grad school, which was slacks and a button-up collared shirt, and everybody mistook me for, a student on campus. So then I had to change my hair and I had to wear a blazer and I had to get nicer shoes, all this, stuff, so that I would be treated I was a faculty member and not like I was a student. So there were little things that I think were an adjustment, for me, going down that path from being a student. I think the other big thing was, when you're a student, you're constantly with people your age or close to your age, and you're all sharing the same experience at the same time. And that was true at every institution that I went to, right? But when I came here, most people were older than me. Well, I was the youngest faculty member when I first got here. So everyone was older than me. Many people had kids, and that was very different, because no one was sharing the experience of, this is my first job, this is, we're at the same age range, we're at the same stage of life. So it was a very individualistic, I guess, thing, for me. And so I had to learn how to navigate that as well. So that was a change too, I think. And then just being able to make choices for myself. A lot of times in school, you're just doing what you're told to do, what you're asked to do, because you're just trying to finish all your work, But now it was I have time to make some decisions, on my own.
Who am I as an adult?
Right. Yeah. There's another stage of growing up, I think, that happens there.
Cool. I guess in closing, what are your takeaways from your time here at JMU thus far, and the program here for theory?
Yeah, well, one thing that is so great is flexibility here. I've felt that, so speaking from the position of my job, I felt that I've had support from everyone and flexibility to make changes and to inject my own research, my own thoughts into the curriculum, which I think not everyone gets at various jobs. So that is one thing that's been really nice. The faculty have been very adaptable, flexible to change. I'm very excited about next year we're implementing this new curriculum that does away with the theory sequence that is traditional at most institutions and instead implements kind of a menu-based curriculum that I think is really going to benefit the students here. It's going to make us stand out as a place where choice is valued, among students. I think that is really great, and that wouldn't have happened if the faculty here weren't so adaptable and supportive, of change. I think another takeaway is just the friendly environment. Like I hear stories of, my colleagues at other institutions, getting their first jobs and realizing that it's not a very, that there are some, that there's antagonism in some, interactions that people have, but that's not here. Here it's very friendly and very welcoming and very open, and that makes for a very positive learning space for everyone, students included. And I would say the other thing is that the students here are just so eager, to learn and so open to trying things. And that makes for a very rewarding, I think, classroom experience for both the teacher and the student. And that's one of the things that I value most, I think, about the job here.
Awesome. As I'm sure you could tell from that interview, Dr. Peterson is such a light for the School of Music, and definitely students, he's a big favorite with everyone at JMU. As someone who has their very first graduate school audition tomorrow, maybe not tomorrow when you're listening, but tomorrow for me, it's really nice to hear that one of the best professors in my mind at our school struggled with his graduate auditions and his undergrad auditions, and it really can put things in perspective and keep us all on the right track that everything will work out in the end. Thank you all for listening, and check back in for our next episode. Episode 8 will be with Dr. Paolo Steinberg, who's on the piano faculty at JMU. Thanks.